Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us at the IICSR a live interaction with Dr. Michael Hopkins. Our host, Dr. Smriti Pawa, would be interacting with him to learn more about what would be the situation of CSR and sustainability post COVID-19. I would like to welcome all of you all in this conversation. I believe Michael is just about to join us. And it would be great to know where are all of you are coming from. Maybe have a round of introduction, starting with Mr. Vishwas Tendulkar.
Yeah. Hello.
Yes.
Hello, everyone.
Hi, Vishwas.
Yeah, hi. It is good to see Harsha again. After that conference, it was very success. I must appreciate the efforts put in by you. It is really the question in front of. My name is Vishwas Tendulkar. I am a CSR, one of the CSR expert of this country, working for the organization RSMGC, and I lead the operations for CSR, CSI, sustainability, and other things. The reason for joining this and good to thanks for in sending the invitation, that after this precarious situation globally, there's a question in front of all the corporates, SMEs. What should we do? I mean, now the situation is, there's the 2% and all these things. That's a different issue, but where to start from? Because we have too many. The biggest issue is this corona. Now, where to start from? And that's something where every corporate, and I'm also looking for the answer, because people have definitely not in a mood to spend for CSR after this. And it's like we're all hospitalized, and we'll be coming out of hospital on sort of May, hopefully. That's something situation. And that's the reason thank you again, once again, for inviting me.
Thank you. In the best interest of time, may I request you to just say your name and the company that you are coming from, so that that will keep things more brief. And then I would hand over to Smriti to discuss with Dr. Hopkins. I'd like to welcome Dr. Hopkins, who's with us right now.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us, sir.
Thank you. Yeah, as I said, I'm Vishwas Tendulkar from RSMGC.
Yeah. So thank you, Harsha. Hello, Michael. An honor to have you here with us. I can't really wait to get this conversation started. But before we begin, let me get all our wonderful participants in on a secret. So when we were planning this and all the points that we thought Michael should cover, I remember he exclaimed, he could talk for 12 hours. So, I have convinced him to talk for about 12 minutes or so before we can take questions from you, of course. And of course, leave the details around this and more on his course that he runs at IICSR. And he's up for the challenge. So please do feel free to punch in, please, your questions, your clarifications. While we are talking, please feel free to punch them in the chat box so that Michael can pick them up and we can pick them up. So, Michael, starting now. In these really turbulent COVID era, which has really an uncharted territory, I often end up tuning into voices closer to my doctoral subject of nutrition. And, when I hear across all the sectors that I have been professionally involved in last 2 decades, CSR, non-profits, from the government side, from the corporate side, I get these red flags, of how COVID is bound to hit population directly in terms of those who get it, and indirectly and variably, because there are societal inequities, right? And the manifestation impact is going to be short-term, medium-term, and long-term in terms of poverty and malnutrition. I know, Michael, you have been kind of leading this case of urban poverty here. But that is a very gloomy picture. The other lens when I put on to look at all of this is from the social entrepreneurship lens, which is the course that I take at IICSR. And there I see opportunities and hope, because, you know, there will be new problems, there will be old problems, like one of the part was just mentioned, and there will be new angles to it. There will be priority problems. So I would really like, when you address, when you start your address here in 12 minutes, to look at these two lenses, you know, and when you talk about, and when you address sustainability and CSR post COVID-19. So over to you, Michael.
Thank you. Actually, a pretty complicated question to begin with. And good morning, everybody. I think is it maybe just afternoon where you all are. Welcome. I'm actually in Nairobi in Kenya, so just down the road from Mumbai. So hello, everybody. I guess we've got people from other parts of the world. So welcome, and I hope everybody has been staying safe, keeping their social distance, wearing their masks, and whatever. As we know, it all seems to be rather tiresome, but also incredibly important, because the disease knows no barriers on class and color, ethnic group, country, and the rest of it. To talk about CSR and all the issues associated with it, let me just start off with to say that to me, corporate social responsibility is a multi-stakeholder way of looking at a company or even a public institution. So the first thing we do is to work out who are the key stakeholders, and then what does responsible mean in our treatment with them. That's as much as I'm going to get into on definitions, but I know that in India, the CSR has been interpreted as project-based, and especially because of the 2% of company profits that are allocated to, these days they call them CSR activities. And Harsha and I, who's hosting this, have had a long discussion about it, and she's drawn me into a little bit the Indian model. I was pretty much against it to begin with, because I'm not particularly in favor of charity, but again, I'd have to spend a long time discussing that. And in the course that we'll do in starting, I'm not exactly sure when we're starting that course, we'll go into these issues in great detail. But to me, when you're working with communities, one should think about, and I'm sure everybody around this group here would agree, we have to think about sustainability. I quote quite often the Union Bank of Switzerland, who taught on my course in Geneva. I spent half my time in Africa, half my time in Europe. And the person from UBS said to me, the problem with charity is that you invest a couple of $1 million. The problem is you get no return on that investment. And not only do you get no return, you lose all your money. Now, in some cases, of course, charity is necessary where you can't work out the sustainability. But I'm always looking towards how can you make any investment sustainable in some sense. Also, my CSR looks at not just communities, but also the wider perspective, there being external stakeholders and internal stakeholders. And when I first started talking about this, stakeholders now 25 years ago, the discussion had been going on before me for a person you might have heard of called Ed Freeman, based in the Darden School in near Washington, D.C. And in fact, one of my colleagues did his PhD underneath Ed Freeman, and we've become good friends over the years. Ed Freeman is considered the father of stakeholder analysis. So if you want to find more about it, you Google Edward Freeman, F-R-E-E-M-A-N, which forms a bit of the basis of the theory that I've developed. And also you can look at my website, CSR FI, which actually explains some of the definitions and the model that I've been using now for 25 years. Now, turning to Smitty's question on jumping from there to nutrition, and then jumping from there into COVID. These are just huge topics to tackle. To me, that the issue of nutrition is clearly crucial to everybody. And how do you achieve good nutrition? But in the emergency that we're now facing right across the world, what we've been recommending is a basic income for everybody in the poor classes. A good friend of mine who talks a lot in India and did a pilot study in India called Guy Standing, you might want to Google his name, who's written books on basic income, but he's in favor of a universal basic income that everybody would get. To me, it gets rather expensive when you say, I have to give a certain amount of money to everybody, then how much should that money be? I've actually made a calculation that if one gave everybody even a modest 1,000 rupees a month in India to the poorest, and it's estimated that 5 or 6% the poor in India, the figures are astronomical, and what I came up with, let me see if I got it written down somewhere. Yeah, it was something close to the rupees 1.7 trillion to the poor that the government is actually transmitting right now. Now, how do companies get involved in this? In India, you have no question superb companies who've been looking at these issues, and Tata Chemicals is the one that's on everybody's list, and I don't know if somebody's from Tata here today. There's Tata Chemicals and the other Tata part of it. Also Infosys as well, which I visited both when I was in India, and I come to India not enough actually in recent times, but to Delhi, where I'm a visiting prof at the IIT in Delhi, and we give a course on CSR there as well. So I have visited the premises of these big companies. Now, how does a company help through their CSR policy? Well, I think the companies realize this, you have to talk to each other. You have to talk to the government to see what the government's doing, and also to other companies. I know around the world that there are that companies don't normally talk to each other. And when I wrote my first book on CSR called The Planetary Bargain, it was in the mid-90s. Oh my goodness, most of you weren't born then. Maybe your mothers were born. And I hope they're all doing well, by the way. In the mid-90s, I said that companies then should get together to come up with a planetary bargain where they could actually look at some of the key issues of the day. Everybody said to me, you're crazy. Companies will never talk to each other. They've got their own profit maximizing to do. But today, you'll see, even in the rogue country, and the rogue country today is which one? Well, they've just decided to leave the World Health Organization. Don't let's go there anymore, but we're pretty unhappy about that. The United States, where some of the greatest companies in the world are, and companies are working together. And one of the leaders there is, as you know, is Bill Gates, who set up Microsoft all those years ago and did a brilliant job at that. And even in the year 2015, he was talking about the dangers of a pandemic and what companies could do. And if you can Google Bill Gates and look at that video, I think it provides some rather interesting lessons for today. But Bill Gates is working with other companies. And you probably don't know, but Bill Gates is the second biggest donor to the World Health Organization than anybody else in the world. The number one donor was the United States at 400 million, and Bill Gates puts in 200 million of his own money every year. I think to cover the gap of the United States withdrawing, that other companies will come in and could probably, I mean, $400 million for you and me, of course, is a lot of money. But for a big company, I wouldn't say it's small change, but it's certainly feasible for them to work together to come up with that money and much, much more. Again, to work in a sustainable manner. Now, Smitty, I'm not sure that I've covered your question. A little bit about nutrition. I just saw a picture this morning coming in from Nairobi, which I shared with Smitty, where a truck in the north of the country was distributing food and essentially throwing out food. And it was surrounded by thousands of people, none of whom were wearing a mask, all jostling to get hold of the food. This is not right. That's not the way to do it. We think the best thing to do is to give people money, because then money can actually use that to buy exactly what they need. If you're a small farmer, even very poor, you might be growing enough food for yourself, but what you sadly lack are medicines or hundreds of other things that people need. So money is king, and I think that one should really make sure that that is the priority in any almost aid-giving body or government body, is that we need to distribute money and not things as much. In some cases, yes, and I'm not saying blanket no, and then sometimes you can make the case for this. But money is incredibly important because it creates, as we economists say, effective demand. So when you go to a shop and you give your money to the shop to buy food, you're supporting that shopkeeper. The shopkeeper then uses your money to buy food from a farmer. So you're supporting that.
I think we have a bit of a technical glitch. I can't hear Michael. It's all frozen up.
In the meanwhile, maybe have questions from everybody so we can put it across to him.
And also, if you could introduce people with their companies and have those questions.
I am
getting some on my the one that already and the way of getting him online.
Okay, in the interim period,
Harsha, are you
maybe Smriti, you
getting
could
Michael on this thing? I'm thinking.
Yeah, you could discuss about the sustainability and CSR challenges which are going on in India in the interim period, the video that Michael showed you.
No, absolutely. So like I was saying, when I look at all the discourse, there has been this, the impact is direct and indirect. So there will be obviously suffering that people would have who would get the infection, but then there is this indirect kind of impact which is going to be huge. The impact, there were estimates, I think IFPRI has come out with this estimates of increase in global poverty and increase in South Asia and Africa, region by region. And so this cumulative effect over the period of time, and I think access also, especially because the nature of the beast here is there is so much of inequity that is involved, like we are kind of functioning online. So there is this access of services to avail services is also going to be an issue, which from my nutrition head, I think there was an estimate of 5 million malnutrition cases in children kind of increasing more, and also in our setting in India, where there is a malnutrition, there is stunting, which is widespread still in the country with children. On the other hand, these NCDs are rising, right? We have these trends of obesity or overweight all across. I think the CNNS data showed 1/10 of Indian kids are pre-diabetic. So all these cumulative effects that it is going to have is what that worries me. When we were just connecting earlier before you all joined in, I was talking about the Poshan mass drive that is basically the Ministry of Women and Child Development's initiative on nutrition that happens, and it is something called a Poshan Pakhwada, which in March it happens for those 15 days, and we were all prepping for that. And then obviously these meetings are not happening, and I'm not sure we are able to reach the grassroots level. These days, of all the hats that I've worn in last 20 years, the nutritionist hat is being called upon a lot now. And I just did a video on, urban perspective on nutrition. But I fear, the community, the grassroots, where this message of at least awareness that is supposed to reach is not reaching. So, and the video that Michael was saying he'll share actually he showed us before all of you came online, where this food truck, and the food packets are being thrown, and there are thousands of people who are surrounding that truck, right? So, so where is the awareness? Yes, there is a paucity of food, but then how do we, Michael is back on. Michael, we can see you, but we can't hear you.
Because I'm not speaking. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can now.
Hi, Mary.
Yes. So, Michael, so if I may, I have been in the task of keeping time, and I did that diligently. So we are kind of over our 12 minutes, whatever. So I was just requesting Harsha to take some questions. We have some questions, and we are kind of, if we can open this discussion for questions also. I'm very guilty of my question being given most of the time here. I would want participants to have the questions here. So Harsha, are you unmuting people so that we can have questions? Or Michael, I have forwarded you some questions if you want to go put them, take them as you wish. Some are in your chat box, some that came to me, I forwarded you.
Okay, let me just see the chat box. It's technology. Hello, chat, where are you? Wake up. Chat box doesn't want to wake up. Oh, hang on.
Probably people can raise hands and we can unmute.
Dr. Hopkins,
yeah, maybe
Aditya Tripathi has a question for us.
Okay, hi Aditya. Lovely to see you. Your lovely sunny smile.
How are you, sir? My wife is also here, Nupur. She's also willing to.
Oh, hi. How are you doing? I don't think we met last time.
So, sir, I have a question that
sure.
Amid all this, which is slightly out of this particular discussion of poverty and all, but it is. I feel it is going to help us, indirectly, in an indirect way. Government of India is coming up with the data. Initially, they came with this compliance that 2% of their profits they are supposed to spend, right? And later on, they are publishing a data that out of eligible companies, the compliance rate is 57%. So my question to you is, what suggestion would you like to forward to the ministry so that it can be strengthened, and companies should come forward and they should have a feel that CSR is not about compliance, it's all about willingness, and they should come forward and they should create this planet. At least amid this Corona COVID-19 crisis, everybody should understand that if planet will not be there, where would we survive? How would we survive?
Well, that's kind of a complex question for the first thing in the morning. I think as you are a very experienced speaker, I know what you do when you didn't get all the whole question is that you rephrase a question that you can answer, and that's what I'm going to do. I think you asked a little bit about compliance, and how far the government should go with companies.
Yes.
Generally, I start from the more liberal wing of liberalism and say I'm generally against compliance and legal standards and so on. And I see my good friend Mary Mayenfish there, from just outside Geneva, who's a lawyer, and she's probably just about ready to throw something at me. But but obviously you need the law and to respect the law. And the best thing is that the law is developed for companies and elsewhere in a democratic society, so that your parliament or whatever can actually discuss them. And the problem is that every law that you create, there are always some costs to some people, and all of us are like that. And also the problem is when the laws become too rigid, we break the law, and we probably break the law almost every day. For example, when you're in the middle of a big city and it's 1 o'clock in the morning, and you come up to a red traffic light with a red man there which says you can't cross, and there's no traffic. How many people don't cross? We all cross at that time in the morning. So there the law needs to be more flexible. But then we break the law, and we don't like to do that. And somebody can create problems. So my long answer to the question that I phrased, I'm not sure if it really covered what you said, Aditya, but I think that we have to be very, very careful about new laws. But of course, laws are essential for our functioning democracy. And India, of course, being one of the biggest democracies in the world, probably the biggest actually in terms of population. Yes, I know there are problems there. Tell me a country that doesn't have problems with their democracy. As Winston Churchill said about democracy, he said that democracy is the worst form of government. Unfortunately, it's the best one we have. Yeah. Questions, quickly.
Michael, we have Amelie Nielsen with our next question. Amelie, do we have you here?
Yes, hello, I'm here.
Yeah, hi.
Hi, Emily.
Hi, I would like to ask you, Mr. Hopkins, how do the UNGP's, UN Guiding Principles, feature into your understanding of CSR?
The UNDP, are you talking about Global Compact or SDGs?
No. I'm talking about the UN Guiding Principles, human rights and business.
Oh, sorry, the Ruggie Principles. And Mary has just raised her hand, and she worked on that with Ruggie. Mary, have you got your microphone on?
Have I? Can you hear me?
Yeah, sure. What can you answer that question? Thanks.
No, I didn't work with John Ruggie, but I've been following this discussion for the last 15 years because I'm a lobbyist with Amnesty International Business and Human Rights Group here in Switzerland. And I think the UNGPs are a very strong force to use at the moment, above corporate social responsibility, because I always say, you know, wherever business goes, as Amnesty says, human rights were there first. And governments, they have the duty to protect human rights. That is why we elected them. Companies have the duty to respect human rights, and we have, and I don't know about India, but a lot of countries in the world today have the government's national action plans where they're supposed to be saying how they're putting in place the UNGP, right? At the same time, as you probably all know, the United Nations and different groups are going ahead to try and get a treaty in place, but waiting for that treaty would take a long time. So for me, when I hear about corporate social responsibility, I think that people forget that governments know that those companies very often are more powerful and can do much more and must do much more. And if we use the UNGPs to push that question, to push that situation, I think that the more we can educate people on the UNGPs, I write a blog on this. I don't think people understand really what's happening. I don't think they understand. I heard you talking about the obesity problem there. They have exactly the same story in the United States now, with many Black people dying, you know, but the government are supposed to put in place those health systems. That's their job. And the companies are not supposed to just do what they want. They're supposed to respect human rights. So the UNGPs, for me, should be used much more now.
I think it's interesting.
I would like to supplement here that in India...
Can I, Aditya, let me just interrupt you a little bit, because there's a point I want to make, is that post-COVID, and it's going to be over one day, what's going to happen? And I think, and there's a very good article in the Economist for this weekend by Martin Carey, former governor of the central bank, which I got at midnight last night, and I read. And in fact, companies are going to be working much more together with government in the future. What's happened, the individualism of the past is going to be eroded because we need to work together, including with companies. So the whole philosophy is going to change a little bit away from the individual to much more cooperation between companies and government, and between individuals themselves. And I think the use of the internet and Zoom and the rest of it, as we're finding out, using these techniques is much more efficient way of communicating. We don't lose very much time with it. We don't actually do very much in terms of polluting the atmosphere, so it's pretty good for the environment, and also for our time. And I know certainly in Africa, where I'm speaking from right now, it's very difficult to have meetings with other people without going to meet them somewhere. And then you have to struggle through the traffic, creating pollution and all the rest of it. Now, if it becomes more accepted to actually meet like this, I think it's going to be a great advantage for the world in terms of the environment, and not the big catastrophe that's coming. Don't forget climate change. One side of it is that people-to-people interaction could suffer. But in fact, what we're going to do, we're going to have more parties. Whoopee! Not political parties, more parties. Aditya, I cut into your question, please.
Sir, I would like to supplement here to ma'am's question, that what is the status of UNGP guideline in India? Government of India has actually realized the importance of it, and they have come up with a guideline called National
Dr. Aditya,
RBC they call it, and it is actually having all the provisions of UNGP guidelines. They have included all the provisions of UNGP guidelines in the name of National Guidelines on Responsible Business Conduct.
May I interrupt, please? We have 2 more questions to go, and we have a time limit over here. We have Ms. Deepa from PVR Cinemas with us. And Deepa, would you like to pose your question over here? Are you around? Deepa?
This is Deepa here. I'm sorry, I'm not from PVR Cinemas. I'm working closely with, I'm working closely with a health NGO called Alert India, and they're trying to repurpose their activities for relief work. So right now they work with a lot of TB, HIV, leprosy patients. And what I'm trying to understand is, thank you, Dr. Hopkins, for mentioning that, it's very interesting to know that priority could be given for cash transfers rather than, supplying essential items. But what I'm trying to understand is, what are CSRs in India more receptive towards, and what are they inclined to fund? Like, I'm not sure if organizations that have a lot of community connect, I mean, they can do money transfers as well as food supplies or supplying PPEs. So what should they focus on? Because obviously everything can't be supported for one particular NGO.
I think copying what this country, Kenya, has done in something called MPESA, M-P-E-S-A, you might want to Google it, where everybody can receive money on their mobile phones. There's a little market just next to me, and I can, with a chap sitting on the side of the road, as long as he's got a telephone, I can pay him $2 for his tomatoes. This is called M-PESA via the mobile phones. Now that technology, I'm sure, exists in India. Here it exists. ATM. Yeah, so it exists right across this country, and I think that is a good mechanism to use. And of course, companies can contribute to that, but I think it's always best that it's coordinated as much as possible. But we don't want coordination to get in the way of action, and that is quite often the problem. Governments put up so many hurdles and bureaucracies, and you must have this list, and who you're giving this money for, did they receive it, and so on. So one has to move much more to liberalism, and perhaps instead of making the laws beforehand, do them afterwards. And so if with the basic income, some of it leaks out and people who don't need it get it, too bad. As long as the people who need it get it.
Thank you.
We have Miss Neha Bhaktani with us. Neha, would you join in? You have a question.
Yes. Hi. Hi, Dr. Hopkins. I think you've answered this question partly, but if you can put some more light on your opinion, if globally businesses will proactively take steps to adapt towards climate crisis. Now, when they're seeing the impacts of COVID crisis on economy, on the environment, as well as on human life, do you think the businesses would take steps proactively to modify their technologies, their products, and the way they conduct business?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. The issue, of course, is short-term and long-term. Is this crisis going to go on forever or not? You see, when businesses invest in technology and new products and so on, they need to have some form of stability and some idea of what's going to happen in the future. COVID, with a bit of luck, will be all over in a month or two. We really don't know. But in the meantime, there's probably going to be other, I hope not, pandemics. But the issue of global warming, I think, is certainly so important and right on the agenda. And it's going to be, everybody says it's going to come about, and we've already seen the destruction that does occur across the world in all sorts of different ways. And I think that's going to be quite a big longer-term focus. And there we need companies' technology. For example, how do you get the plastics out of the sea? We know that by 2050, the weight of plastics in the seas around the world is going to be greater than the weight of fish. Hang on. How true that is, I don't know. But the thing is that we need to start looking at those longer term issues, and governments have got to work with companies on that. Companies have got the entrepreneurs, and the governments have got, to a certain extent, the guiding hands. But as you know, there's a big movement between government and the private sector continually, so that you're getting aspects of the private sector in government and vice versa. Nothing is perfect, that's for sure. But it's quite clear in this country, in Kenya, that all the major companies have come together in one group.
Hi, Michael. I'm sorry. Yes. I thought I'd just pick my when you said nothing is perfect. In a perfect setting, I would have wanted you to speak and be to connect with everybody, but I think we have less than a minute to the meeting, and I didn't want to finish without thanking everyone and also making announcements that I'm looking forward to hosting Dr. Skedgard on 24th here, 4 p.m. She's the CEO Global CSR Live from Geneva, and on 25th, Dr. Upadhyay, I see him here to talk about the concepts on CSR. So I just wanted to kind of, properly thank you. Michael warned me against calling him Dr. Hopkins, but I have to call him Dr. Hopkins when we formally give a vote of thanks. And thank you, all of you, so much. Harsha, thanks so much for getting us all together and all your time. I think the rich landscape that we have covered is amazing. And if there are more questions, like I see there are, we might think of another kind of follow-up session like this, depending upon how much time Michael has. But for now, I think we'll have to cut this meeting. As we say, we are not in a perfect world.
Sure.
So with apologies and with thanks, we'll have to cut this short. Thanks, Michael. Thanks, everyone.
We will be sending across an email to all of you all with chat interactions, and also with Michael's upcoming course with IICSR. Post this meeting, I will be sharing Michael's email ID, so in case you all have any further communication, you all can directly reach out to him.
That will be great. That will be perfect. That is